Getting ready to go cruising can feel like an overwhelming, never-ending list of things to do. Don't add being worried about your galley to that list. Hi, I'm Nika Waters, and welcome to the Boat Galley podcast. Today I'm actually going to be sharing some information about how to approach your galley and food management on board in ways that won't make it feel overwhelming. If you're worried about cooking on a boat, don't worry, you're not alone. For some people, the idea of cooking in a kitchen where you have access to everything at your fingertips and a lot of space to work in can feel overwhelming. And when you pare that down and narrow it down to life on a small boat, and let's face it, any boat is a small boat out there, the idea of cooking food and being in charge of all of the stores and things that go along with it can feel really, really overwhelming. Don't feel overwhelmed. There are a number of small things that you can just use as tips in your head to know that it's going to be okay. And I think for the number of people who have come to my course at Cruises University and people who have taken my online course, the general question initially is, how am I going to buy all the food that I need? And the first thing I will say is just relax. Everybody eats. Everybody eats in any inhabited place that you're going to visit around the world or in the United States or wherever your home country is. Everybody eats. It might not look the way you're used to. It might not have your favorite familiar foods. It might not be the things that you feel are required for your particular way of eating. But if there are people living in a place, then there's food there to be had. To me, part of the adventure is, of course, in trying a number of those foods. That said, boy, is it nice to be able to come back to my boat and cook food that I'm familiar with in ways that I'm familiar with. So, tip number 1 is everybody eats. Tip number 2 is, I will say, because the next question that people ask me all the time is, can you give me a shopping list for me to go shopping? And I would ask that you think about whether you would go to your neighbor or go to a stranger down the street or a stranger on the internet and say, hey, can I have your grocery shopping list? And I'm going to go grocery shopping with that list and then cook food from it. Unless you really enjoy an adventure, or unless you are eminently and incredibly more flexible than many of us, you wouldn't be happy taking somebody else's grocery list if you're living on land. You're probably not going to be happy taking somebody else's grocery list when you're getting ready to go cruising. They're just not the same things. And so tip number 2 is really, it's okay to like the things that you like and to buy the things that you like and you know you're going to eat. It can be challenging to cook food on a boat that's moving and pitching around and rolling and it's hot out and there's no air conditioning and you're living with a small stove and a small oven and small amounts of counter space and a very small fridge. So sometimes the idea of coming in with very familiar ingredients can make the difference between your comfort level with making a meal that you and everybody else on board will enjoy and not. So make your own grocery list up. Don't rely on somebody else's list, because their likes will probably not be the same as yours. Tip number 3 is that it's okay also to take shortcuts. There are a number of times where maybe particularly I'm recording this and it's the beginning of September in the Northeast Kingdom in Vermont. And if I drive down the road, there are farmers markets and farm stands that have, particularly this time of year, lots of great tomatoes and still corn on the cob and delicious, delicious fresh vegetables. So a tomato sauce for me this time of year might start with fresh tomatoes from a farm stand. If you're a gardener, you might have lots of that stuff coming out of your ears. Probably when you go cruising, you won't have access to all of those fresh things all the time. So shortcuts like already jarred sauce or canned tomatoes or a tomato paste in a tube, those are great shortcuts, and it's totally okay to take shortcuts like that on the boat. The 3 tips that I mentioned are just the tip of the iceberg. And in fact, those 3 tips are just the tip of the answer iceberg. I've put together a course called The Self-Sufficient Galley, A Practical Guide to Food Confidence, that goes into those answers as well as numerous other ones in much more detail. The idea of everybody eats, that comes into figuring out how much you want to take with you when you leave to go somewhere, because feeling like you have food and can cover yourself if you go somewhere where there aren't things that you like, that's as big a worry as anything else. The question about taking somebody else's stores list and not taking somebody else's stores list, and how exactly do you figure out what you're putting on your provisioning list, I go into far more detail in a whole module called Stocking Up Sanely. The idea of taking shortcuts, to me, is answered in a pretty interesting, different way with a couple of modules, one on bread making and one on salad dressing, and again, will be continually added to. There's a link to the course in the show notes. I put it together to help people become more confident. That seems so glib. It seems so easy to say. But if you feel good about the food that you have on board and understanding how to prepare it, you go a long way towards feeling good about life on the boat as a whole. The course is on a special price right now, a little bit of a pay what you can. It's a $5 or $14 or $29 course. If you use the coupon code GALLEY20, it'll give you an extra 20% off. I'm looking forward to sharing an Anchorage with you, and we can trade all of our best food tips. Have a fantastic week. Thanks so much for listening to the Boat Galley podcast. We love it when we hear from you with your questions and your comments. We love it when you leave us a 5-star review. And we love it when you share us with your friends. I'll talk to you soon.